Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am sorry that I'm not able to be there in person today, but we're on the road, both of us. And so I'm just going to share with you the presentation that normally we would embed. And now that you've had a chance to go through sort of the assessment side of it, and again, looking at how those concepts, those important pieces fit together, and the great ideas that Ted has been sharing with you, I'm going to piggyback off of some of that, and we're going to look at just some possible ideas of how you might unpack this particular organizing idea. It isn't completely new to grade 2. You'd be able to use some of the old resources that we have as well, but now is a good time for us maybe to infuse some of those new thinkings and just to freshen it up a bit. But also, I can't give you a lesson plan for everything that we're going to touch upon here. So remember that what you're getting is going to be hopefully some resources that you would say, as I'm talking, hey, yeah, I could use some of that, or that would fit well with what I already have in there. So it's more just to try and fill that toolbox, or to give you an idea of where you could start if you've never taught this before. So again, it's a unit of ideas and how I might unpack some of the things myself, but in the short time that we have, we can't give you the whole thing. So we're looking at sound and light, and it's a fun one for students for sure. It's an organizing idea in which they can really get engaged. Every activity or every new aspect of the organizing idea, the big concept of sound and light that we want to unpack, can be done with hands-on. So this is a very interactive organizing idea that we're going to venture into with them. And it has the potential really to be adapted very, very much so for the different areas that you live in. And I'm thinking, for example, you know, if you're in an area where light ice fishing might be something that the students would be exposed to, having an ice fishing tent would be something that you could really leverage in this conversation between light and sound, because they're heavy and they muffle sound, but they're also perfect for doing those dark kinds of things that you want to do and enhance the lighting. Okay, so let's get going. So when we're looking at the sound and light, there are some things. Remember, this is not a box science where you're teaching a specific concept anymore, and then the students are walking away and then they don't see it again in the next grade. You are going to be linking so many of your concepts and using those to scaffold the learning as we go forward. So there are some pieces from the kindergarten and grade 1 that we have already covered that, of course, your students wouldn't have been exposed to this year from previous learning. So I've included one slide deck in here of direction, path, and speed. And those are important concepts that rang through both kindergarten and directly linked into grade 1. And in some respects here, they also build on the foundation of when we talk about how does sound and how does light travel, right? It bounces off of things. It goes in a straight line. It has a difficult time going through certain materials and substances. So having a little bit of the background conversation and knowledge might be helpful. So I've only included that first slide just as information. And if you feel that that would be something you'd like to just look at and then say, yeah, there are pieces of this I might want to show the students first, then we could go ahead and do that. And remember too that you have access to the kindergarten and the grade 1 folders. So if you need any materials out of there, you're always able to go back and grab those. Or if you wanted to see kind of how did we suggest the transfer learning might have happened at the end of that unit, and you might get some ideas of how the students would have moved forward from there. Okay, so when I'm unpacking this unit, I would start maybe, and this is personally, but I would start with sound because it's something that I can readily just have students grab things right away in the classroom. Not that I couldn't with light, but sound is easier. And I want to just look at what kinds of sounds can we make? What kinds of sounds do we hear? And just starting off with some activities. So we'll unpack that. And then what are we hearing, right? Are we hearing really loud sounds? Are we hearing really quiet sounds? Is it a vibration that I can actually feel, like really loud speakers, for example? And then moving that into light, and just how does light work? How do we get light? And students right now think that, light is, it's just always there. We turn on the switch in our classrooms and it comes on, and we would do that. But where did it come from? And how did we get to that point? But then there are parallels between how light travels and how sound travels. So once I've kind of unpacked both of those, that could be a transfer activity that we ask them to consider is, what did they see that's the same and different between the two? Right? So those could be or that could be a classroom activity that you do. And then that's what the Let's Put Our Thinking Cap is. I have some suggestions of what you could use for transfer activities, but again, it would depend on what you have and what's available. So what I've given you on your first slide are just some ideas. And again, we could even use those pictures with the students and say to them, what are you seeing here? And what do you think they all have in common? Everything here can make noise, right? That's really where we're going to. But they may not be exposed to tons of instruments, but they might have been to a party where they had party. They blow into them and they make noise and the paper comes out. Some of them work, some of them don't work. They might have younger siblings where they have toys that rattles. They push a button and it plays music, right? Just things that might be familiar to them. Going for a walk around your classroom, what are some things in there that you could make sound with? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a push a button, right? It could be something as simple as grab a pot, grab a box, grab a metal dish, grab something, a pie tin that you use for painting, and I can tap on that and it makes sound. So what are all the different possibilities? So for me personally, I like starting always with engaging types of things. And so I would have a whole bunch of these and just, enough of them to choose one and still have some left over so no one's kind of committed to just been using one. Grab all kinds of different things. They grab one each. And then we just ask them, does what you just picked up make a sound? And, yeah, I know that's kind of going out on I'm going to go crazy at the end of that lesson because you're going to have lots of different sounds. But that's the whole idea is we want them to be able to say, mine makes this kind of sound. And then maybe putting them in a circle and letting them do just a quick demo of what sound they were able to come up with. And we can, have some chuckles that they sound differently and that some of them are really quiet and some of them are super loud and some of them are annoyingly loud, right? They have a real reverberation. So we just talk about that sound. So that's the kind of place that I would go. And some students might say, well, what are you going to do with glasses? Well, I might have a glass where I tap on it with a pencil. Or if I take a pencil versus a metal pen versus something else, does the sound change, right? Those are other things that we can talk about, which also tie into what we're going to unpack. But this is their intro so that they start to become more aware of what's in their classrooms that actually make sound and that have the potential for me to learn from them at the same time. Okay, so let's carry on. If I've done my activities, I have a really quick little video at the top here that I won't enlarge this and play the whole thing. So you get the idea. It's really doing what I'm suggesting we would do by finding the same materials in the classroom. And then it does go to unpack what is sound, right? So it's a great intro little video for them to watch as well. And you could even have all this activity conversation and then just watch that part of the video and just say, wow, isn't that what we just did, right? Look at all the different things. If you're a musical person and you have a guitar or you play a different, that would be a great time to bring those in as well, right? And let them feel them. And then later on, how does it feel different with different objects that we include to make that particular musical instrument? So when we're unpacking sound, one of the things that we're looking at are those three components, the characteristics, the sources, and the materials. And each one of them has different aspects that we want to unpack with the students. This isn't a one day on characteristics and a one day on sources. And I would almost argue it's impossible to talk about the characteristics. Like if I'm going to look at different things today that make different kinds of sound, loud and quiet, there's no way for me to have just an identification of loud and quiet without talking about why. Why is that like that? Like, what is it is that made up that instrument, or it's our vocal cords and we talk really quietly, right? It's what are the different aspects that, and these all tie together. So it's not possible for me to just talk about volume and not bring in something from sources and something from materials. So you're linking them back and forth and being fluid between them. And that's would be my suggestion, because we don't want children just to learn just the characteristic, check, check, we did that. Now let's go into sources, check, check, did that, move on. That's not what this is all about. So having those for quite a few days, really, you're going to unpack some of those. And again, the different kinds of instruments that you gave them to choose from on the floor, would any of those fit into every one of these categories? Like, are there some that would have higher pitches or lower pitches depending on what you gave them? And how do we have that younger children have those higher pitch sounds, right? When they scream, they can do that. But then how do they make a low sound? Like, they need to know what that feels like to make a low sound. At the bottom here, you'll see a unit that I'm going to suggest might be one to really explore. Inventors for Tomorrow is a site which supports home learning as well. So it's also written for parents to go in and have a look at, you know, what do I have at home if I was unpacking this with my child? But there's so many neat little ideas in here that we can easily adapt. And so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I did bring it up here because if you have never taught the unit sound before, sound and light before, then you might want to start here and just have a look at what is available, because I could unpack a good portion of my unit through just looking at some of the things that I see in here. And there's great little videos for, you know, just looking at how do I make sound visible? So that would be an activity similar to what I showed you, but there's little stop points in here that you could have. So I would go through this. And the other reason I'm going to point this out to you is, as we talk about pitch, we talk about the different sources, we talk about the objects, what was the material that it was made of. You're seeing these come up here as well, right? So this is a lovely little site if you can ignore some of the ads that come into here. But just a simple thing like, what if I took a ruler and put it on the edge of the table? It makes a sound, right? Just a wooden ruler, a metal ruler, like whatever they have. Different ones would even be better because they're going to give different sounds. And I just take my finger and I just sort of, without breaking it, tap it on the end and it makes a sound. But then if I take that ruler and push it out a little bit further, I have even more leverage, kind of like a springboard or a diving board. It's still going to make a sound, but it's not even going to be the same sound that it was a few minutes ago when it was closer into the table. And so those are simple little ideas. We don't have to get super fancy and buy a bunch of stuff here to create a unit on sound and light. So again, there's these, where can we listen through the walls? What kind of school do they have? Concrete walls? Are they in a school that still has some wooden walls? What do they hear, right? Can some of the kids go on the outside and can they be talking and can they hear they're talking? Can they just hear sound, but they can't make out the sound? If they're on the other side of the door, etc. Right? You're getting the idea of where I'm going to. So this is a wonderful little site that I'm just going to suggest you might want to do. They talk about where do our ears fit into this? Like, does it matter where I'm standing? Do I hear it differently if I'm at different locations? So again, you know, you could have a really loud piece of loud object that makes a sound and have them move around different places in the classroom. Take them in the gym, right? This is a good phys ed one that we can link sound and activity together too. So we're going to run to the other end of the gym. I'm going to make this sound. Does it sound the same? Okay, we're going to play us take 20 steps forward. So that forward backward, that came from kindergarten grade 1 motion. And then again, I'm going to make the sound. How does it sound now? Right. So there's so many different little things that we can do to teach this unit. It doesn't have to be big and splashy, that's for sure. Then I've also provided you with a number of, again, resources so that, you know, every day when I use videos, I might use a video to unpack without even telling them what our unit is. I might use it as an opener. But then I also want to have some refreshers as we go along. And we know that videos are never identical to each other. So each time I show them, although the concepts that might be unpacked are similar or the same, there's always something new that they throw into it. So again, it's just another way for them to revisit, refresh. And what did we learn that was new today here that we didn't learn from before? So there's a read aloud here, which is a great one. Nice one to do is carpet time, read a story. It's also a rhymer. And then what is sound? Just another intro piece to it. So again, I won't go through each one of these. So that's a lot of activity. There's lots of things that we can do there with sound. And then we want to move into light. Now, some people say I do light and sound parallel. That's great. If you want to do them separately, we're going to bring them together at the end because there's parallels, right? How does sound bounce off of concrete walls? How does sound bounce off of a very smooth surface like a whiteboard? How does sound get absorbed when you have lots of stuff in the classroom, paper and boxes and whatever? Sound gets absorbed. It's like a sponge into that. It doesn't bounce off as easily as it did before. So again, that's even a conversation to have depending on where you sit in the classroom. Different things would sound differently, even though I'm standing in the same place in the classroom, you're all hearing it very differently because the sound is being absorbed or bounced off of different locations in the classroom. So with light, in light, they talk about, we have sources of light, could come from the sun, could come from fire, could be bioluminescent, it could be electricity, right? Flick on the switch, but where did that switch connect to the electricity? And how does electricity give us the light? You are not going to get into switches. You're not getting into super deep, right? That is not the intent of the grade 2 curriculum. They will unpack some of that later. But again, you've got some quick opportunities just to have, let's see, where do they think they get light from? And most of them will say the sun will come up for sure. So you might not even want to show them this picture yet and just ask them an open-ended question. But then again, fire is another source. They may not know that there are things that glow at night. Bioluminescence depends on where they live, depends on if they've traveled, depends on what they've ever seen outside. Some students don't do a lot of outdoors things. So are they even familiar with that? So that might be something you have to unpack a little bit more so with them. But your outcome, U1.1, sources of light and sound can be identified, right? So where do they get their source of light? That's your focus. Where did the light come from? And yes, you're going to unpack them to a certain degree, but remember, not getting overly technical here. That's not the point of the grade 2.
Today we'll learn.
And then as I unpack light, what might that look like, right? Again, I don't want to get deep, but I have these different categories that I need to make sure that I'm clear on. And so we want students to know that light comes from different sources. Sometimes they're man-made and sometimes they're natural. It's definitely the sun being natural. Lightning is another one. You can get into lightning, but then you also can get into some pretty deep conversations. So if you want to talk about it, and it would be great to bring in lightning, because that's a natural source of light. Then just to give them a quick overview of what lightning is, but there's no intent there to get deep with that either. So again, when I look at this, we're looking at what is it, where's my sources, how do I maybe generate it just on a very surface level. So I've given you again some suggestions in here. The Science A to Z comes from NGSS, which is the Science Foundation in the US, but it also is a very progressive one. And if you ever are looking for resources, just Googling that particular Science Foundation, first of all, will give you a lot of information. This is one that is linked to it, Science A to Z. Now, it is a subscription one. It's a very good one, though, and I'm not suggesting that you subscribe to it, but what I'm saying is subscription one, so you won't have access to everything that's here. But what it does give us is good information to start off with, and even the teacher guides that they provide their teachers with, and I think you'll probably get pretty jealous when you look at it and say, okay, I want that. Because it is very well designed. It's designed for a very traditional structured approach, if that's how you like to teach. Or if you're more sort of on the side where I live, I love inquiry, I love hands-on, I love open-ended kinds of questions where kids have to roll up their sleeves and do some investigating in order to get an answer to the question. That's the way, and then we tie it all together. So this is offered in a lot of different places here. But when they talk about the correlation guide, remember that is not ours, but again, you can see how things have been mapped out, and it's very helpful. Even though it's not our curriculum, it's very helpful to see what they're connecting. But the unit guide here is the one I'm going to just bring up for now. Okay, let's go. Here we are. And it will give you a great idea of maybe how I might structure a unit on light if I've never taught it before. So it talks a little bit about what the overview is. What do I need to know as a K-2 student about light, right? This is what their overview is. And what's the big idea in that? So this is all very helpful for us. Spark is just basically designed to get sort of students thinking about where we're going to go. So it could be that opening video that we talked about, or maybe it's an activity that's suggested here. Or you've got your own, right? Again, here's an activity that they give you. And then below that, they talk about what are some prior knowledge. They give you some great guiding questions, because I should find out, what do they know as well, right? What are they already, where is their level of understanding before we even get into this? So those probing questions are great. And that also gives me an opportunity, and I'm going to even say this, that some of these probing questions would be great transfer activities. So once we've taught the section on light, we tie it together with sound. We say maybe what the similarities are. I actually have that as a transfer question for them, but I could even use some of these as, now can they take what they've learned and apply it to answering one of these questions? I wouldn't put all of those up there, for sure not, but it gives you some ideas of what you might use. What are some resources that you might need to have on hand? And then the vocabulary goes a little bit further than what we would need to do in grade 2. But again, it's nice to have some of those definitions for yourselves where you can go in and just have a look at what's there. So this is a great little tool that you can use to get some ideas from. Again, it's not necessarily all going to be available to you when you go in and try and do all of the hyperlinks to it. But here are lots of feedback and materials that you can use. Projects are at the end if you're looking and you want to tie them maybe into arts as well. There's a lot of things that you touch on here in this unit that also links to your math program. So there's a good tie that we would be able to do some cross-curricular connections with that as well. Okay, let's go back to our slide deck. Or I'm going to go back to this one just for a second. So when you go to the bottom, I'm just going to show you, when you scroll down, they also give you suggestions for books. And when you want to click these on, they actually have those in the background for the teachers who are subscribed with this and that are members of the school boards that use this directly. So they have access to the books right off the bat. But that just gives you a sense of what are some titles that I might look for and that you might actually already have in the school. These are not unique to another country. They're quite common titles. So again, you've got some different ones. Stained glass, right? There's a great one. I don't have to have the book, but there's a great idea. Do you have any stained glass in the school? How does the light look different when it comes through the stained glass? Or if you have some at home that you could hold up on the window and show them. Why does it look different? Why isn't it all the same? Because the colored hues that they come through, some places the glass is thicker, some places it's beveled and it's not smooth. And so the light isn't coming directly at me. Those are great pieces to bring into this mix. So again, some supporting materials, you see more information at the bottom. So there are lots of ideas, even though I can't access them. Have a look through this because I think it's valuable in getting some ideas of things that you could do. So again, what if I don't have a ton of resources? What if I went outside? Let's go for a walkabout. Let's look outside and let's go for, do we feel the sun on our face? And where else do we get light from? And they might be walking around, say they see light stands, right? What are sources of light? Do they see electrical power poles, right? Just a simple walkabout outside. It doesn't have to be because I live in a specific location that I can only see. You're all going to find things that connect to the light. There's another video in here that I've also given you that might give you a good connection to that as well. Oh, and I see there's an error on that. I will fix it before we post that. So then once I've done sort of my sound and light, and in your conversations about how light travels, and that's one of the pieces that you'll unpack, as it travels, we see lots of parallels to how the sound traveled, right? So that we can see how that works. So then you might want to have a conversation about a thunderstorm. I would go there and just say, who remembers what it's like to be in a thunderstorm? And when you see the lightning, is the thunder there right away? And some students might not even have paid attention to that, right? They might not even have thought about that happening. There's lots of videos that you can just Google a thunderstorm and it'll come up and you can just hear that there's a delay in time. Or we talk about the closer the thunderstorm is to us and directly overhead is typically when you get that lightning flash and like within a second or two that the thunder crashes in there, it's close to you, it's right over top of you. Whereas where I see lightning and then there's a delay in the thunder coming, it's a distance away, or I just hear slight rumblings because it's quite a distance away. So I'm not getting the full force of it. But sometimes thunder is strong enough that it actually makes things rock in a room, or just, you can feel the vibration of it. So we could have that conversation to tie those together. It doesn't have to be big. We don't want to get into kinetic energy and all those pieces. So in the transfer, remember the transfer is like your summative. Did they get what we were talking about? And how are they going to demonstrate their learning to me so I know that they understand it? And I'm just throwing ideas out here. You may already have something that you've been using in the past. But one of the most common ones for the past grade 2s is for them to design their own musical instrument. So again, you either provide them the tools and say, here's what you have available. Can you make a musical instrument out of that? And in this case, I'm even saying that maybe it could make 2 sounds. I like it to have 2 different sounds. More is great, but I mean, whatever they design, let's see what they come up with. And making things like string and elastic bands and whatever they need that's going to connect to make their sound. Or is their sound going to be because there's a hole in it and they're going to bang something on it, and different sized holes will give me a different sound, kind of like a flute, right? We have different holes, or a recorder. So Let's Talk Science is one of those locations where you could get some ideas about designing a musical instrument. Again, I'm personally not one who likes to say, here's what it should be, here's what you're going to use. I might say, here's a whole bunch of things. You think about what you might want to build, and now you see you come and get some things, because some trial and error in that is a good thing too. I start building what I thought was going to be an instrument. It's going to work and it's not going to work. I need something else. So that's the good learning experience. We want them to start learning to keep a record, and maybe they're not good printers and writers yet, but they can still draw a picture. Like, what did they do in their process of building it? So what were the steps that they did? And what were the pieces that they put together, just to get them to start thinking about how that scientific process works, and that I evaluate my steps along the way. And I had to go back and get something because this didn't work. There's a rubric that I have found as well for evaluating a student's design of their own musical instrument. Very simple, very easy to follow through. Again, just an offering, not suggesting that's a must do if that's what you were going to do as an activity. Other ones would be, why do we use flashlights? Well, usually because the power goes off, or we don't have a light switch to switch on. But if that's true, then, is a flashlight the same everywhere? Does it matter where I stand? Will I see everything that I want to see because it's a light? And we all know that when we stand back, and flashlights can come in all different strengths. So that would be a good one for them to test too. And which one can they see in a distance, and which one gives them a brighter shine. You could bring in, and I guess this is where I would go, is if I have students that are interested in that, I might say, why don't we bring in different size flashlights, and you tell me, how are they different? Like what was the difference in what you saw? It could be even just putting their hands in front to make a shadow, and I'd set it up in an ice fishing tent, like totally pitch black then, right? So then they could shine onto the wall in the ice fishing tent the different flashlights and use their fingers, and they'll see very clearly that they're going to be either more clear, intense, different sizes. What happens when I move the flashlight back, right? Or what if we go into the gym, if you can dim the lights in your gym and it gets really dark? What if we go in there and we sit down, and then one of our children keeps moving back 2 steps back? Or let's talk about forward and backwards pathways, right? Which flashlight can they see the most? And is it really hard it's just a dot now as they start moving away? So just those kinds of activities would be great links into this. We got March coming up. So, what is a rainbow? Right? That's a good one. And we see rainbows outside in nature, and we often say there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So could I slide down the rainbow and find a pot of gold, right? How do you make a rainbow? That would be a good question. How do you make a rainbow? Can I make a rainbow? So just for them to think about. And then how are sound and light the same and different? So that would be something that some students might want to get into. So these might be just your transfer activities, your culminating thinking about how did they do in this. And it is not imperative that every child do exactly the same thing. Having choice here would be a great opportunity for them. Okay. I have some additional resources. So the Inventors of Tomorrow, that's the one where you go in and it's been designed basically for homeschooling, but she has quite a collection of resources there. So it's worth you going and having a look as an additional piece to what you're doing in other units as well. And then there's one here, and that's that same link. So I'll fix that one as well. So just watching this one ahead of time. And the reason I have that note at the bottom is it's a fairly lengthy one. So I would never show the whole thing in one shot anyway, but it has all the different components that you're going to teach them. And that's why you would never show them that for one length, but two, there's so much information in there that I might just show them the first 2 minutes or the first minute of the intro piece. And then we do our discussions and some activities. And then I'll bring in the next minute and a half or minute that I have because it talks about the next component. So that's where you want to be very intentional about using this one and watching it ahead of time, just so you know everything that's in there. Some of them goes a little bit deeper, and deeper doesn't mean I would just not ever show it to them. Deeper means I wouldn't necessarily teach it to them, but that means that I'm not going to avoid it. I want them to see it. And they might have some good questions to ask about it, but we're not assessing that, right? We're not going to go there. All right, well, I hope that that gives you some really good starting points, if nothing else. It has been an absolute pleasure working with all of you. This is our last session for your grade because you don't do space. So what Ted probably mentioned already is that we will be redoing the science series again, just like we have now, unpacking them, but we will do it maybe a little bit differently. We won't take these down. These videos and all the resources we've shared with you will still be there. We're just going to revisit some of the pieces because remember, not the whole province did science, but because it's being implemented in the fall, now it'll become a different lens and people will now need to start thinking about unpacking the new program. So we will revisit front matter and those types of things. But when we revisit, we may just add another video to the deck. But we also want to do a little bit more in that assessment world and a little bit more in the scientific method world. Like just add in the pieces that in this first hour, we just never have time to do the first time through. So it will not replace anything that's in your folder. But what I would say to you is maybe just keep an eye on the folder and look for new things that might have come in. So the new sessions are already posted, they will be posted shortly. And then we will be unpacking one organizing idea at a time, just like we did now. So between now and June, we're going to do the revisit of the introduction and add in the new pieces to that. And then we'll do the first organizing idea and get people ready for September, October. And then we'll start unpacking them again, sort of at a 6-week, 2-month series or however we're going to do that. So thank you so much. We hope that this has been helpful to you and at least getting you started in this year of just piloting and trying things out. And thank you for all your efforts and your willingness to share. And some of you have been sharing some materials, and if you have things that you want to share and are willing to have us just post them into the folder for your grade that others can use, please don't hesitate to share them with us and we will gladly put them in there. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.